Number 1.
The first time I experienced sleep paralysis was when I was 19. But my story doesn't start there. This story kind of ties in over a span of my life, so please, bear with me. When I was about 7 years old, my parents were going through a nasty divorce. They had 8 kids, and my dad was extremely abusive and unfaithful for practically their entire marriage. I asked my mom why she ever stayed with him for over 10 years, and she always says she never regrets any of it, because she ended up having all of her kids. We turned out okay, and are all very close to her. Anyway, I'm the youngest, so I don't remember a whole lot that happened firsthand, but I know I was there. My story begins one night I went to bed in the creepiest room in the house. My mom and I shared the upstairs master bedroom at the time, which we all called the creepy room. I didn't know it at the time, but apparently some crazy shit went on in that bedroom. I'll get to that later. I went to bed by myself because my mom and siblings were watching TV, and I remember leaving the lamp on. When I woke up, it was pitch black. My mom was sleeping in her bed and I could hear her breathing. I leaned up to check the clock at the foot of my bed and was caught off guard at the figure of a shadow just standing there, staring at me. I don't remember being terrified or even scared, just really curious. I remembered the thing in intense detail. There were no features whatsoever, but a perfect silhouette against the window shade. It wore a hat like a fedora, but with a wider brim, almost like a small cowboy hat, and a trench coat. I know it was a trench coat because of the broadness of the shoulders and the little loops that trench coats have, and his torso was square and boxy like the coat fell down to his feet. It was obviously a really old man from the slight hunch and shape of the head, but that's what I imagined it to be. I stared for like 7 whole seconds straight. It didn't move or seem to breathe at all, just stood there, and I know I wasn't in sleep paralysis because I suddenly had to go to the bathroom, but was nervous enough to think I could hold it, and so I just put the blankets over my head and turned onto my side, eventually falling asleep. Skip forward 12 years. I was 19, living with my sister in her apartment, about 40 minutes away from my mom's house, which was long past moving from the old farmhouse. My sister still works at the same place, a mental hospital for the criminally insane, and at the time I was working at a hospital for dementia patients who were just living out the rest of their days. I say days, because it was almost once a week that someone passed. We both worked night shift and had horses, so the little bit of time we had together was spent drinking coffee in the afternoons before our shifts or chores. And those times were filled with conversations that mainly rested on unexplainable or creepy experiences. One night, we both had a weekend that co-aligned and we decided to stay up late talking. After a long paranormal story time, I was suddenly reminded of the Shadow Man. I told her about it thinking it was just a dream, and I was a crazy child with a huge imagination. But when I looked up at her, she was completely white. It actually freaked me out. She then told me her own story. My sister is 10 years older than me, so everything I clearly didn't remember, she remembered all too well. My parents would be gone well into the night from running their business, or going to church meetings and stuff, and all of us kids were left at home. The older kids to take care of the younger kids, as the oldest still living at home was already 21. She told me this crazy story about the creepy room, that we would all be downstairs watching TV, as at the time we all slept in that master bedroom, and my parents in the downstairs room. Almost every single time we were home alone, they would hear someone, heavy-footed, running back and forth in the creepy room. Doors slamming was a daily occurrence, and sometimes, which scared even my oldest brother, was when the footsteps would come out of the fucking bedroom and begin running down the stairs at them as they entered the living room where the TV was. Nothing would ever be there. Nobody playing a prank. All siblings accounted for and visibly terrified. On a few accounts, they all had to leave the house and sleep in the outside shop because of how terrifying things got. My other sister, who was about 6 years older than me, would see the shadows during the day, mostly upstairs in the creepy room cast along the hallways, or in the master bedroom in the mirror. Eventually, they told our mom, who brushed them all off. The most terrifying thing she told me was that one night, way before I was born, my oldest brother saw the man in the hat one night. Just like me, he was more curious than scared, and actually talked to it, and he said that it sounded just like an old man. But he was very creepy, like you could hear his intentions in his voice. The conversation started out innocent. Who are you? What are you doing here? Do my parents know you're here? The answers that my brother claims this thing gave him was, your mother doesn't know I'm here, but I know your father. He and I talk sometimes. That night, I experienced sleep paralysis for the first time, and I just know it couldn't have been a coincidence. I was falling in and out of paralysis over a span of about 20 minutes. I would shut my eyes and begin vibrating, like I was having a seizure or something. The only thing I could hear was the blood rushing through my veins. My eyes would strain to open, but they just couldn't, and I felt completely hopeless. Even my dog began to paw me as I felt him on my hip, and during the times where I could snap out of it, he was all over me like I was about to die, and he saved my life, but then I would just close my eyes again and fall right back into it. For those of you who have never experienced sleep paralysis, here's a small description. Imagine you are dreaming a nightmare, but lucid enough to tell yourself to wake up, because something terrible is about to happen in your dream. But instead of bursting awake and realizing you're sweating and hot and everything is safe, you get caught between awake and dreaming. The entire room around you feels like it comes to life, vibrating and pulsing. Sometimes you hear things like voices or see things like shadows, or worse. I didn't hear or see anything, but the feeling of complete dread and hopelessness was drowning me. It was what I imagine you feel like around a dementor. After I woke up for like the 7th time, I finally said fuck this and noped out of my room. My dog and I both slept in my sister's bed that night. The "this can't be a coincidence" deal comes from the conversation that happened when I asked my sister if I could sleep in her bed. She told me that she kept hearing knocking at the front door, and got up about 4 times to answer it, and every time there was nobody there. By the 3rd knock, she just sat in the hallway freaking out. She couldn't explain it, but something was completely stopping her from opening the door, and she was frozen in fear. She was actually just about to sleep in my room with me. The last experience I've had was just a few weeks ago. My husband was working really late, so I was home alone, just sitting on the couch watching Friends and binging on popcorn with our dog, playing with her toys on the floor. She eventually got bored and disappeared into the room where I couldn't see her. Suddenly, my body went on full high alert mode. Every hair on my body stiffened, and I began to panic, but my body was just frozen in fear. In my head, I was imagining this totally creepy fucking thing walking into the den with me, and cornering me on the couch. The blood was running in my ears, and my whole body began to shake, almost like my sleep paralysis, but I was fully conscious. Watching TV, I know for a fact that I hadn't fallen asleep. Nothing came into the den, but during those minutes, I was fully expecting something, the image in my head, to just waltz into the room. Eventually it wore off, and my dog came into the room, tail stiff, ears perked. She jumped onto the couch with me, and we continued watching TV, but I didn't move from my spot until my husband came an hour later. I can't explain it, and I think it's important that I don't believe in ghosts, as in the sense of someone's spirit being left behind, but I do believe in demons, and the devil.
Number 2.
Lately, things started happening to my sister. She's 2 years younger than me. Nothing happened to her while I was under attack almost a year ago, but that changed about 6 weeks ago. She was sleeping and suddenly woke up in the middle of the night and realized she was paralyzed. Normally, she would be too scared and try to fight it. After a while, the paralysis wore off. She quickly turned on the light and looked at the time. It was 3 o'clock in the morning. This became a frequent thing, having trouble sleeping and waking up for no reason between 3 and 4 a.m., sometimes paralyzed. One time she felt like something was trying to pull her soul out of her chest. Similar things happened to me before, but it didn't feel like it was trying to pull something out. I felt like it grabbed my heart and squeezed it really hard. Believe me, that didn't tickle. So it must have been painful for my sister as well. There was this one time when she was asleep and woke up while someone was pulling her leg. This someone was pretty strong too. A few moments after she woke up, it stopped. She thought it was me, but when she turned the light on, she saw me lying on my bed, sleeping. She was really scared 2 weeks ago. We went to bed quite late that night, around 2:30 in the morning. I couldn't sleep. I had this gut feeling that there's something in the room. So I went to our living room, which is right outside our door, and watched TV. Less than 10 minutes after I turned on the TV, I heard my sister turn on the lights. I thought I woke her up because the TV was too loud, so I turned the volume down, when suddenly the door of our room opened, and I saw my sister's scared face. She was even breathing heavily. This was serious. She's not the type to get scared easily. Of course. I asked her what's wrong. She said it happened again. She could feel it grab her feet and the paralysis started to spread. When she finally shook it off and opened her eyes, she saw something on the wall that she's facing while sleeping. My God. It looked like a gray shadow with no eyes. And an open black mouth. I was so scared. She then quickly turned on the lights and it was gone. Just when she felt relief, she noticed that I was gone. It scared the hell out of her because she thought she was in a nightmare from which you can't wake up. Me and my sister had those quite often. You wake up in your sleep and everything looks so real, you think you're awake, but soon realize you're not. And then usually something really bad happens. That kind of nightmare. I don't have to say that she was more than glad to see me watching TV in the living room. I then went with her to our bedroom and we slept with the nightlight on. I didn't have an uneasy feeling that time, so we both fell asleep and nothing attacked us. It's been a week and nothing happened, but I'm not sure that it's gone, whatever it is. And I don't think it's the same thing that attacked me. Or it could be that it's back and mad for some reason. I don't have a clue, but I'd like it to leave us alone for good.
Number 3.
First off, as of late, I've been very interested in the pagan and Wicca religions. I've even gone as far as getting copies of rare grimoires. Something happened to me last night. Still not really sure what, but something. The eve of this happening, I was reading a particular grimoire by the name of Kingdoms of Flame. I felt very comfortable with this, since I have a rather large grimoire collection of ebooks. Well, anyway, there was a certain incantation I read aloud on accident. Happens to all of us, right? And almost immediately after I realized what I had done, the air turned extremely heavy and almost electric in my study space. At that point I knew I was in for at least a little bit of fun this evening, not knowing any specifics of what may occur, of course. And may I add that this feeling in the air did not dissipate until after I awoke the next day. Even when I awoke, I had a menacing feeling of discontent. Shortly after the air shifted, I felt it was time to hit the hay, so to speak. Probably no more than 10 minutes passed, as I was laying in the darkness concentrating on my astral self. I heard a knock on my door going to the back patio. And mind you, it would be near impossible to get in my backyard unless you felt like jumping a fence just to knock on my door. I heard this knock, which I later tried to debunk as the house settling. The only way I could replicate anything remotely close to the sound I heard was to tap on the door with a single knuckle. And almost immediately after I heard this, my entire body went numb. I knew immediately this wasn't right, so I attempted to close myself off to anything leeching my energy. Well, I think this just pissed it off more, because when I closed myself off, I got an extreme feeling of dread and fear. This feeling lingered until I was able to free my astral self, and somewhat drift off to sleep, I guess you could say. Typically, I can remember my astral dealings in the morning when I wake up, but this morning was just strange. I can only recall a single tiny fragment of my time spent in the lower astral plane. Very weird for me indeed, but wait, it gets better. After this feeling of dread and discontent finally went away, I started my day off with a shower per usual, but as I unclothed, I look at my calf above my knee and see 6 bruises altogether, 5 of which were in perfect finger marks, and the 6th was the big bruise, where it looks like I was grabbed violently underneath the finger marks. I've had plenty of dealings with the paranormal, but nothing has ever escalated to being physical. Kind of afraid I opened a doorway I can't shut. As I said, my incantation, if you wish to call it that, was completely unintentional. I have a certain tendency to read aloud while also reading silently, and I'm not sure what to really do. Here are the 3 pictures I've taken. Also, as an aside, I'm not sure if this is related or not, but earlier today I felt compelled, I guess you could say, to snap pictures of a mirror in my living room, and much to my discontent, I captured a shadow person in the mirror in 2 pictures.
Number 4.
My story begins a couple of years ago. I just moved into my new apartment and was beginning a new life as a returning college student, working part-time as a bookkeeper for a grocery store. 2 months pass, and my life has pretty much settled into its new routine. One day, after pulling another all-nighter for an exam, I hop into bed shortly before the sun rises, anxious to catch up in my sleep before the start of my first class, which, for this particular day, wasn't until 1 in the afternoon. It wasn't long before I started to feel myself drifting off when, from out of nowhere, I spotted an orange ginger-colored cat skulking around my legs at the foot of my bed. When I tried to move to get a better look at it, though, I found myself paralyzed, to the point I was lying on my side, facing my room directly across from my closet, with my right arm tucked under my pillow. From the corners of my eyes I could still see the cat. It was small, about the size that a 6-month-old kitten might be, but I could never see its face. It would always walk out of my line of vision or turn its head just enough so that I could never get a good look at it. For whatever reason, it kept trying to get under my covers, but there was something about this cat that it didn't feel right. I didn't think it was there to hurt me, but I felt like it was malicious and dangerous somehow, and I didn't want to have anything to do with it, so I struggled against it. I fought hard, but it was difficult, because I felt like something was holding me down from the inside out. The best I could do was to move in short, jerky movements. I tried to yell too, but it was no good. Nothing better than weak moans. Despite this, however, I managed to keep the cat out for a short period of time, until it finally managed to find an opening that I wasn't able to move quickly enough to block off. Watching it sliding under my covers made me panic, and it gave me just enough strength to free my arm from under my pillow. But, just as I did, I felt something grab my wrist and push my arm back down just over my head. As the cat disappeared under my blanket, I felt an urge to look toward my closet, and there I saw jet black smoke pouring out from under the cracks. I panicked again, only this time I also became very angry, and I pushed against whatever was holding me down. I don't know if it was from my own power, or if the thing just gave in, but I was freed, and the first thing I did was barrel towards the closet door, because, in the heat of the moment, I wanted to face whatever was in there. Despite being so scared, I was just so enraged. But when I reached my closet and attempted to open the door, it wouldn't budge. Then this horrible mocking laughter filled my head. It was enough to make me dizzy, and I had to take a few steps back until I reached my bed again. I sat down to help regain my equilibrium, but then, as I looked up to resurvey my situation, I saw this dark spot forming in the upper right-hand corner of my room. It spread quickly, like ink in water, and before I could do anything about it, I blacked out. When I came to again, I was back in bed. The first thing I did was to look for that damn cat, but it wasn't there, and neither could I find any evidence that it had ever been there. When I looked through my closet, everything appeared normal. By this time it was a little past 8 a.m., and nothing seemed unusual. I got back into bed and sat there for a very long time, trying to determine if what had just happened had only been a very lucid nightmare. It was strange, as I'd never had an experience like that before, and never a dream so real. After a while, with nothing else to go on, I attempted to shrug the experience off as a dream, but I was still shaken and found it hard to relax. I tried to force myself to go back to sleep, because I had a long day planned later, but I just lay there, staring up at my ceiling for a while, just kind of afraid to close my eyes. About 5 minutes pass. I'm finally beginning to really calm down, and then, from the corner of my right eye, I see the orange ginger cat walking by the side of my bed. Before I can react to it, I feel its tail hit me right under the chin. I leapt up in bed into a full standing position, but the cat was nowhere to be found. To this day, I still question whether my experience had been real or just a very vivid hallucination. But the feel of that cat's tail on my skin remains a very constant reminder of that moment of my life. Since then, I have never had a similar experience.
Number 5.
I live in Perth, Western Australia. The house I'm living in now is fairly old, but I wouldn't call it very old. I've lived here since I was in year 2, at 5 to 6 years old, and I am now 20. Before my family and I moved in, Mom would be very wary of setting foot in the place, and would mention that the first owner of the house had something terrible happen to them. She wouldn't elaborate any further. Both my mother and I have seen strange things on numerous occasions, and both of us have what you might call psychic abilities to some extent, depending on how you choose to view it. Both her and I have been able to sense the paranormal for as long as I can remember, and her side of the family is particularly sensitive to it. Over the past few years, I've experienced the ominous feeling of being watched in my own house, by something that I can't visually detect. Most of the time, I know it's there, because I can strongly sense it, and have seen it for fleeting seconds every now and again. One night, some months ago, I woke up because the room had grown cold. I usually leave my bedroom door closed, unless it is too hot, or I just want a little light to filter through from the kitchen, since we always leave the kitchen light on at nighttime. Feeling wide awake with an unexpected fear, my eyes darted to my doorway. My bed rests against the wall of the left side of my bedroom, when viewed from the entrance, so I always have a clear view of my door when I sleep on my left side. I noticed that my door was wide open, and I didn't remember leaving it that way because I don't usually do that. My mom was fast asleep, and my sister was staying at her dad's place for the night. To my horror, I saw a small figure watching me from the entrance of my room. It looked like a dense shadow. I'm not quite sure how else to explain it. Slightly propping myself up on one elbow, I spoke out my little sister's name, thinking it was probably her. I thought maybe she had changed her mind and been dropped off during the night. Then suddenly, the being rushed up to my bedside in the blink of an eye and moved alarmingly close to my face. Terrified, I found myself staring into a face with no discernible nose or eyes and a gaping wide mouth. Where its eyes were meant to be were dark holes, from what I can remember anyway. I'm not too sure. My body froze in horror. Moments passed with just that creature and me in the room, gazes transfixed on each other's faces. Eventually, I was able to snap out of the frozen state my body had taken on in fright, and I flailed and kicked at the thing until it suddenly dissipated, with a blood-curdling sound that reminded me of an anguished scream of some sort. I heard it out loud, and deep within my head, if that makes sense. It made my hair stand on end, and my heart beat alarmingly fast. To this day I have no idea what it was. A demon of some sort? I don't know what it wanted. It was terrifying, and every so often I catch glimpses of shadow-like people or creatures from my peripheral vision. I've heard many a tale about these beings, but even so, I cannot but wonder if they are meant to be good or bad or what. Many times I've awoken from sleep from someone calling my name, and is usually a man or someone who sounds a lot like me. Even when I'm not asleep, I sometimes hear whoever it is calling my name, and occasionally, I can feel something touching me that I can't see. Last night, I was sitting at my laptop doing a virus scan when I felt the hair on the back of my neck prickle, and a very distinct hand placed itself on my nape. I felt the palms and fingers and everything. Even though the air around me was suddenly freezing, the hand on my neck felt strangely warm, temperature-wise. I couldn't figure out if the touch was malevolent or benevolent in nature, but it did frighten me. I can't tell if it is just trying to communicate with us, or if it just wants to give us a scare for the hell of it.
Number 6.
I never knew what sleep paralysis was. When I would fall asleep and wake up, not being able to move, and would see things or hear voices, I thought the worst. It went from happening once every few nights to every single night. Usually, it would only last for a maximum of 2 minutes, and I would try to forget about it. But one incident makes me dread future occurrences. I fell asleep, and my sleep paralysis occurred around 3 times, only lasting up to 30 seconds each. When I finally did fall asleep, I began to have the worst nightmare, and it seemed so real. In the dream, I was being haunted by a demon that wouldn't leave me alone. I had an iHome on my dresser with my iPod in it, and I got in bed. A few minutes later, the music started playing on it, so I got up and removed my iPod. After lying back down, the music started playing again. I was so scared I woke myself up and ran into my sister's room to tell her about my dream. Just then, this entity came into the room, yelling, and I ran out and climbed in my bed. The only thing I could think of doing was praying and asking God to make it go away. As I tried to place my hands together, it was impossible. Something was pulling my hands apart to keep me from praying. I struggled as hard as I could, and to my surprise, I woke up. I never knew it was possible to dream inside a dream. This was the most terrifying thing that had ever occurred to me, but it didn't in there. Eventually, after convincing myself that I was fine, and it was just a dream, I started to drift, suddenly to awake to the horrifying feeling of pure hopelessness. I couldn't move. I could see a dark figure in my room while hearing what I would call a demon in my ear. It was making growling noises, and it seemed so close, it was almost as I could feel it touching me. This occurrence lasted about 4 minutes, and when it finally went away, all I did was burst into tears and run to my closet to find my cross and rosary beads. Researchers on sleep paralysis say this experience is merely your brain awaking before your body. What you experience is nothing but hallucinations. But is it possible for hundreds of people to have the same visual and audible hallucinations? Everybody is different. Nobody dreams the same dreams, right? I feel there's more to sleep paralysis rather than a medical explanation. I'm not going to say it's work from the devil or some kind of alien experience, but I find it hard to believe everyone's brain makes them see and hear terrifying things while losing the ability to move. I guess we'll never know. Hello guys, Hollowkeez here. Thanks for taking the time to watch and listen to my videos. My throat is doing a lot better now, so I'm quite happy about that. Another thing I'm happy about is the fact I will soon have a new mic to use for future videos. For most of these videos, I've been using a mic embedded in my webcam, if you can believe it. So, very soon, I'll be getting an actual mic, so I'm hoping my voice quality will be even better. As for these outros, I'm currently rethinking if I should continue doing them after each and every video. But most likely, as long as I have something to say, these will be here to stay. And no, I didn't mean to rhyme just now. My subscribers, thank you for sticking around and anticipating my uploads. It means a lot to have such loyal viewers already. And thank you also to all of my new subscribers who found something to like about my still growing channel. I hope I'll continue to satisfy your tastes for the horrific and unsettling as time moves on. If it's fear you're after, welcome home.